I'm Sимеон Дянков. I was for 4 years Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister of Bulgaria. Currently, I'm a professor at the London School of Economics, teaching international finance. Prior to joining the Bulgarian government, I was for a long time at the World Bank, where I was responsible for business reforms, regulatory reforms, enterprise restructuring, and I've worked in the majority of countries in Eastern Europe over the last 20 or so years, especially with countries doing significant reforms. And this is the purpose of being in Ukraine. Also, we recently have published a book which summarizes the reforms in other East European countries, which may be quite useful for the types of reforms that Ukraine needs to do today. I think every country in Europe is going in the next 10-15 years to move towards more indirect taxation and taxing labor less and taxing capital more. Because all of Europe, Ukraine included, my own country, Bulgaria included, has an issue with demography. That means that social security taxes have to be lowered over time, including in Ukraine, and the personal income tax, which is a sort of a labor tax, needs to be lowered as well. VAT or some taxes related to carbon tax, for example, on the environment. Financial transaction tax are the type of taxes most commonly discussed as compensatory mechanisms for the reduction of the labor taxes. Another way, which is more temporary but can be used in Ukraine over the last 2-3 years, is the next 2 or 3 years, is to use revenues from privatization, for example, as an additional revenue source and do the tax reforms during the privatization rounds. Ideally, taxes should be adjusted very quickly and radically, because once you start phasing in reforms, you never know when the next government is going to come and what would be the political situation, whether you'd have to delay. It's relatively straightforward how privatization is done. There is a lot of experience in other transition economies of how it was done. Our book actually shows a number of examples from Estonia, from Slovenia, from Slovakia, from Bulgaria, from Romania. So it clearly can be done. There is enough knowledge. So then it ends up being the case in Ukraine that the government or parliament parties simply don't want to do it, which is a different topic. It may mean that a new government needs to come, and that has to be their main goal, to first start the privatization process, maybe with some large, attractive enterprises, businesses that would be of interest to strategic investors, both in Ukraine and abroad. And if, let's say, within this year you have 10, 15, 20 large businesses that go through this process, I think you'd have enough revenues to consider significant tax reform. But also you'd be able for next year to learn how the process goes and go through a second round of privatization. Not all large enterprises have to go at once. I think the simplest answer to corruption in the public administration, in the tax administration specifically, is just to have very simple flat tax type of regime. Because once you have that, once different businesses have the same tax rate, and businesses and individuals have the same tax rate, then there is no particular reason to cheat in the tax administration. In other words, there is no benefit for businesses to bribe tax officials to somehow give them preferences, because there wouldn't be any exemptions, there wouldn't be any preferential tax rate.